Hey everybody, Greg Pruitt here with Idaho Dispatch, and we are getting very, very close to the primary and wanted to take the opportunity to reach out to as many statewide candidates as possible. And so today we are joined by Art Macomber, who is running for Attorney General. How are you?
Good morning. I'm really great. It's bright and sunny today, although windy.
Yeah, Southern Idaho is a little windier than...
But that's okay. That blows out all the cobwebs, which is frankly what we need in the AG's office. So
Okay.
I'm good with that.
All right. Well, I'm sure you're probably ready for the final day of the campaign and to get this thing over with, but got a few more days left, so let's kind of go back maybe to the beginning of your thought process, and this is usually my first question to candidates is, you know, especially when you're running for a statewide race, that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of money and travel and time out of your life. So what was there one particular incident that made you go, I got to get in this race? Because that's a big decision, and what was that like for you and your family?
I had been monitoring the governor's actions and the AG's actions through 2020. And I didn't like what I saw. I was very much, up to my eyeballs in private practice. And when I saw, and I had time, and I started to look up things, and I thought, why does the U.S. Constitution give the power to set election rules to the legislatures of the states? If that's true, then why in March 2020 does the governor of Idaho issue a press release that says him in the executive branch and the Secretary of State, with the assistance of the Attorney General, have altered Idaho's voting rules unilaterally to go to mail-in voting by the absentee ballot process? That was kind of the first one that perked up my ears. In addition to the lockdowns, I'm one of those people that thinks that the Idaho Constitution is actually a limitation on state power. And so when the governor says, well, you have to close your churches, that really took me back. I said, wait a second. Section 4 of Article 1 of Idaho's Constitution says we have rights of faith. We get to exercise them. And so as I watched these things happen, Greg, I finally decided, I looked at my background and I said, am I prepared to do this? It's not only my study of the law and the growth of my law firm from myself to 6 attorneys, but my study of the common law. I'm a little bit of a student of legal history, and Idaho is a common law state, so we go all the way back to Magna Carta. That's a whole interesting world there that most people don't venture into with me very often, but I looked at that, and then I looked at the administration portion of it, and I have, as you'll see on my YouTube videos this week, significant experience in the private sector with organizations. The AG's office is 220, I think for this fiscal year, they're authorized at 226 positions, I believe is the number. So it's not that big an office in the world of offices, or at least in my world of offices. And so I looked at my administrative background, and I looked at the way I had managed the firm with, frankly, stellar growth, and you do that by providing good service. And I started to hear stories, the AG's office doesn't call me back, they don't respond to my letters, this and that. And I thought, I wonder if I could do that job. And November, and then November 2020, and then December, and I talked to my wife about it, talked to my kids. I said, look, political campaigns in Idaho are treacherous. They're like the Little Salmon River in spring. Everything's whitewater. It's very dangerous. And my family said, Dad, you've never shied away from a challenge. So sorry about that. I'll turn my phone off. You've never shied away from a challenge. If you think you're up to it and Mom's behind you, then go for it. And of course, my wife, who is ever supportive after 30 years of marriage, she's been very supportive. She said, Art, you can do this. You have the knowledge, you have the skills. So that's why I'm sitting here today.
What are What are, if you had, I guess, two main issues that you are running on as Attorney General that you think need to be different maybe than what is happening currently, or maybe what happened previously during COVID or something? What are two of the biggest issues that you are focused on and would be focused on as Attorney General?
One thing I've noticed is that Idaho's budget is 45% federal funds or more this fiscal year. So that's a little scary to me, because it's almost as if we're being turned into a department of the federal government and they just shove money at us. And that makes me nervous, because Idaho is a very independent state with independent people. And because the federal government owns 63% of Idaho, we can't get access to our natural resources as we did in the past with logging and mining, et cetera. So the very first priority is that I need to assess how the Attorney General's office can best push back against the federal power. The Biden, it's called by everyone in the campaign, using the words that I first used, because I was the first one in any statewide race in February 2021, the Biden overreach. You hear this a lot from everybody. There are over 80 executive orders he's already issued, and one of them just locked us out from new oil and gas leases in Idaho in March of 2020. And we've seen these coming down the line. They want to take over our elections. They want to significantly alter our Second Amendment rights, which are really, in my view, are Section 11 of Article 1 rights of the Idaho Constitution, right? Because the Idaho Constitution, in my view, is actually more powerful on gun rights than the Second Amendment. So that's my first thing. And so in the Attorney General's office, I think we need to have, there's already a civil litigation group, and I think we need to tune that up a little bit, and I've been using the words a strike force or a task force to evaluate what's coming at us from the federal government and see where it impinges, where it really infringes on Idaho state sovereignty. We need to reinvigorate our 10th Amendment sovereignty as a state. The Attorney General does that two ways. One way is by initiating and joining lawsuits that other Attorney Generals around the country are involved in. But my commitment is, I think that Idaho should be first. You know, everyone looks at Idaho and says, oh, such a red state, you know, those Republicans are so conservative over there. But frequently, Idaho doesn't join these lawsuits. They don't get involved. And so those are the only ones we know about. So that means there's others slipping under the radar. There are opportunities for Idaho to exercise the state sovereignty that John Roberts mentioned in the Affordable Care Act case. He said the states are sovereigns, and sometimes they have to act like it. Okay, so that's the one thing. That's the first priority, is that strike force that actually pushes back against the federal power. The second thing is, in order to re-energize our state sovereignty here at home, there's some work to be done on our republic. Now, as the Attorney General, I can really only do half of it, but in 1997, the attorneys were taken away from the state legislature and put into the executive branch. So now there's a conflict of interest between the branches. And so the second goal would be to take some attorney positions from the AG's office and cut those from my budget, and then work with the legislature and help them set up a legislative counsel's office. Now in the YouTube videos on May 12, I explained the legislative counsel's office thoroughly. As thoroughly as really can be explained as an outsider from the Attorney General's office. What this would do, Greg, is it would restore some of the balance of power between the legislative and executive branches. And you can see this in the heartbeat bill, the Senate Bill 1309. The Attorney General's office and the executive branch issued an opinion to the legislative branch about that bill, said it was unconstitutional for various reasons. The legislature passed it anyway. It went to the governor in the executive branch. He looked at it and said, well, I think it's probably unconstitutional, and then he signed it anyway. So now it's Idaho law. Planned Parenthood immediately sued, and because there was no protection for that opinion between the executive branch and the legislative, Planned Parenthood actually attached as Exhibit 6 to their petition to the court the opinion of the Attorney General saying that it was unconstitutional. And so you can imagine a judge, well, Mr. Attorney General, you're here representing the state of Idaho, and I noticed that from the plaintiff's brief here, Planned Parenthood has attached your opinion about why you think this bill is unconstitutional. Now, on behalf of the state of Idaho, please beat your own argument and tell me why it's not. This is so embarrassing to Idaho. And, you know, you have to imagine for an Attorney General that's been there for 20 plus years, why didn't he notice this before? Why wasn't this corrected? I mean, this is so simple. And so that's really the number two thing, because we really need to rebalance our republic. The legislature has been nearly powerless the last 2 years, and we know they can't convene into session. So there is a constitutional amendment that will be coming through, I believe, this November for the voters. And I haven't finished my analysis of that amendment, but basically it would allow the legislature to convene itself during certain periods. And so I think that would be very helpful, because the legislature has no inherent power to convene itself. In Idaho's constitution, the governor has to convene it if it's a special session. So we have to wait for that. So those are the two things. We need a strike force to fight back against the federal power, and we need to help rebalance the republic by getting some attorneys back to the legislature. And that will help re-energize our state sovereignty.
Okay. And so do you think that the AG's office is maybe too big right now with the amount of personnel that they have, based on what you're saying? Because I think in one of the debates, one of the criticisms was that, you know, you and your other opponent that are challenging AG Wasden, you know, you've never ran any kind of big office like that, and so you kind of touched on that briefly. Can you kind of explain, you know, your response to that?
Well, the Attorney General's office, as I said, 226 employees, and I believe there are 7 offices statewide. Okay. So there are people spread around the state in the Attorney General's office. And those offices, most of them are quite small, obviously. You know, Idaho Falls, Twin Falls, Pocatello, Boise, Caldwell, Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene. I think that's 7. Now, the city that I left out, they're all going to be mad at me tomorrow. but no, I was, the government, as everyone knows, is a monopoly. And we give it a monopoly for certain express purposes. And that's why we break it up into several little pieces, right down to 15 or 16 different little departments on your property tax bill. All the districts, all the water, sewer. That's the divide and conquer theory of Idaho small government, and that's why we have 3 branches in the republic. And so, but it's still a monopoly for the powers that it exercises. Now, I was an employee of Ma Bell for 10 years. Which was the monopoly telephone company that ran all telephones in the United States. They were all landlines, they were all copper. I think when one of my opponents was 11 years old in short pants, I joined Ma Bell. That would be 1979. And then 1984, Judge Green broke the Bell system up. And so I was with it till 89. And then I left for greener pastures because we were promised, you know, a free market in telephone services, and that just didn't happen. So I got a little frustrated. But when I was there, one of my positions in the late 80s was I ran sales programs for new products to the Northern Division of Pacific Bell, and I was in the division office. There were 4 of us. There was the division manager. There were 2 other managers, and there was myself. There were 5 districts in the field, and there were 5,000 employees that were in the districts, which is approximately 1,000 employees per district. So I would drive around the state and talk to all the work groups in the installation, in the outside crews. We're talking the cable guys, the linemen, the assignment people in the central offices, basically everybody behind the veil of the telephone company. I was talking to them. And so we got very good results there. And there was also management experiences I had with, my own little groups, 10 to 15 employees, and there's various experiences I had there. And then I was with Micron Electronics. When it was 1995, I joined, it was Micron Computer back then. That was when J.R. Simplot used to come walking through with his big white cowboy hat and talk to us all about how computers were going to change the world. And there were 700 people there when I joined Micron in 95 in Nampa. And when I left in 2000 to go to law school, because I didn't have an electrical engineering degree and I could see the dot-com crash coming, I decided to go to law school. There were 4,000 employees there. So what I saw at Micron was very rapid growth by people that did not have a lot of outside management experience in larger companies. There were a couple. There was a head of manufacturing who came from an assembly type manufacturing environment, which was really what Micron was. It was a computer assembly business. So there were managers that did have that experience, and I watched them, and I watched the managers that didn't have the experience. I was in charge of network training for a while. We had a small group of inside technicians who would take calls from the outside technicians in the field all around the country and say, "Oh, I got this problem on the network, can you help me?" They'd help them work it out. In fact, at Micron, I almost got fired because I tried to leverage my Pacific Bell management experience and help get the company onto a better track in some areas. Just little suggestion here and there. And they were like, "Art, we don't need your input." I'm like, okay. And as you know, the company eventually lost the race to Dell and Gateway and Hewlett Packard, and it went bankrupt, and they came out of bankruptcy, and I don't know where it is now. It's not where it was on Franklin Road in Nampa. But they didn't want to take my advice. Maybe I gave the advice wrong. Who knows what happened? That was very early on in my career, but eventually they promoted me off the sales floor and into the networking group, and then eventually I was running the product servers. With my product team, there's about 15 people on the product team from all the different departments. We issued the first 1-inch high blade server in the industry. It's a little server about this big, and it shoves in like a drawer to a massive server box. And that was called the NetFrame 4400. You could look it up. And so I've had a lot of different management experiences. And there are others also, but I think those are the two most significant inside, like office-oriented management experiences. And so when I look at the Attorney General's office, it's not that big an office. I know how to run offices. I also know, and those are really on the YouTube videos this week. I've started to talk about, my private sector experience, Greg, has got me like chomping at the bit. Like, can we get this primary over so I can get elected, so I can get into office and actually help this Attorney General's office become a great office again? I went into law late in life, and I truly believe that the law is a noble profession, but you have to have lawyers that are willing to uphold that. As an example, new lawyers need to be able to look at older lawyers and say, that's a guy I want to emulate. He does it right. He's honest, he's on time, he doesn't run away from bad cases, he doesn't run away from bad facts, he talks about what's important and why, and he knows how to make his case in a fair and ethical way. You don't have to hide the ball, you don't have to be behind the curtain. We've all seen this sloppy law done before. Everybody's seen it. But that should not happen at the state attorney general's office. So I am really looking forward to quality control measures and speed of service. You know, service provisioning is always very important. And that's what I really am, like I say, I'm kind of chomping at the bit to get going on this project.
Okay. Let's bring up one big case that I know has come up on the campaign trail quite a bit, and that is the lawsuit out of Texas over the elections, the results of the elections. And I can't remember off the top of my head how many states were involved in that. Idaho was not one of them. I know the AG's office and the governor declined to join in that lawsuit. What is your opinion on what the AG should have done? Should they have tried to join in on that lawsuit or not?
I think they should have, but there's additional things to have been done. And so, as you'll remember the case, the state of Texas sued 4 defendant states: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and the 4th, Wisconsin. And the argument was that Article 1, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution allows the legislatures to make the rules. So it's pretty clear, it's pretty straightforward. It says, let's see, Section 4, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. And then there's the hated semicolon, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. So it's really the first part of that clause that the lawsuit was concerned with, because and I'll give the example of the state of Pennsylvania. Their legislature had set the voting rules according to the U.S. Constitution. This is a provision that all the states agreed to when the Constitution was created in 1787. And so the legislature of Pennsylvania created the voting rules, but then the executive branch and the judicial branch of Pennsylvania altered those rules without involving the legislature. So down in Texas, they looked at this and said, you know, that's unconstitutional, and because this is a battleground state, we think that may have had some effect on the elections that would have made the outcome different, so we're going to protest. They filed a complaint with the U.S. Supreme Court under Article 3 of the federal Constitution. That is an original jurisdiction case. That is to say, the U.S. Supreme Court is the trial court and the appellate court and the court of final decision. It's basically you start there and you end there. That's the way it works. So Texas sues Pennsylvania and these 3 other states. And the U.S. Supreme Court, by a decision of 7-2, decided Texas does not have a cognizable interest in how Pennsylvania does its elections. Now, if that's, and then 2 justices, of course, Alito and Thomas, said, no, that's not right. We should take this case and look at it on its merits. But the majority wins, so the case was thrown out. But the complaint by Texas was never actually filed with the U.S. Supreme Court. In other words, they took the complaint and they filed it and they said, can we file our complaint? The U.S. Supreme Court said no, and they threw it out. So the merits were never looked into. Now, in my view, and I wrote a letter to Lawrence Wasden about this back in 2020, I believe it was. No, it was 2021 it would have been, I think, by this point. In any case, the first half of my letter said, I think you should have joined the Texas versus Pennsylvania suit. The second half of the letter said, but I can see why you wouldn't want to, because you did the exact same violation of the U.S. Constitution in Idaho. So it would have been a case of pot calling kettle black. So,
So just to, sorry, I don't want
Yeah.
to interrupt there.
No, that's
Now-
all right.
Now, now you're making an accusation against him. So what specific accusation are you saying? Like, hey, you did the same thing in Idaho, so what are you referring to?
In March of 2020, the press release is on Governor Little's website. The governor and the Secretary of State, Denny, with the assistance of the state attorney general, is the words used in the press release, with the assistance of, altered Idaho's voting rules so that there would be mail-in ballots only using the absentee ballot process. So that was an executive branch alteration of Idaho's voting rules without the involvement of the legislature, in violation of that clause I just read. So it's pretty clear that that's the case. Now, two things. If I was Attorney General and I had joined the case, what I would have done is requested the U.S. Supreme Court alter the parties, bring in other parties and push some other parties aside, because, and this is a kind of a first-year civil procedure question, but it's fairly simple. You have three branches of government, and all three branches of Texas sued all three branches of Pennsylvania. In my view, what should have happened was the legislature of the state of Texas, who would have been in the U.S. Constitution, should have sued the executive branch and the judicial branch of Pennsylvania and the other four states, and then requested the U.S. Supreme Court join in, involuntary joinder of the legislature of Pennsylvania onto the Texas legislature's side as a plaintiff, because it was the Pennsylvania legislature that was also harmed also. Now, with every lawsuit, you have to see whether the parties are the right parties to the case, and are they configured correctly in opposition to their claims. And so I think that would have helped a lot. So that's one thing. The second thing is, Lawrence Wasden has been running around Idaho at almost every speech saying, he goes like this, he says, "Do you want California to run Idaho?" And then everybody goes, "No." And then he says, "If I had joined Texas versus Pennsylvania, then there's no reason California couldn't have sued Idaho for anything." And he starts listing the two that he lists most often is for abortion rights and for gun rights, California could sue Idaho. Well, this is a ridiculous statement. And the reason it's ridiculous is because, first of all, there's nothing about abortion or gun rights in Article 1, Section 4 that clearly names the legislatures of the states as having been involved. So he brings in these other issues, like California could sue us over water, California could sue. Now, what he doesn't want to admit is that he's right. California could sue Idaho, because Idaho violated the same provision, right? And so he's right on the one hand, but he doesn't limit it to the federal constitutional provision, and so he misleads people into thinking, "Oh, California's going to start suing Idaho for everything," which is not the case. But they could have sued Idaho for this one, and that's what he's trying to avoid. And I don't blame him. I mean, it never should have been done. You know, the legislature of Idaho should have been convened by the governor to determine the voting rules, to handle COVID, to figure all that stuff out. And it just wasn't done. You know, the legislature of Idaho should have been convened by the governor to determine the voting rules, to handle COVID, to figure all that stuff out. And it just wasn't done. So.
I hear you guys talking.
No, we're doing an interview right now.
We're doing an interview right now.
I'm just wondering what's going to happen.
Yeah.
What can
We
be
can
done?
we can talk in a few minutes.
Okay.
So the end result is that the current Attorney General is misleading the people, and you've seen his ads. He says, "I'm a constitutional conservative." If he's a constitutional conservative, he wouldn't have violated this document. And there are other violations too that I can talk about.
Okay. Is there, towards the end of the interview here, is there any other issues that we haven't brought up that you think are really crucial and maybe delineating the differences between you and your opponents and why you're the best person? Any particular stances on certain types of issues, I guess? Well,
this is the interesting thing. We've kind of been training, and when I say we, I mean the incumbent and myself, the real attorneys in the race, the practicing attorneys who know the law, have been schooling Raul Labrador on these points throughout the race. So he's usually 3 weeks to a month behind, but eventually he gets on board with what I'm arguing should be or could be or how it works, because he really doesn't know how it works. What we have is these two constitutions. Here's the Idaho State Constitution, here's the federal. These documents have a particular relationship to each other according to the powers of the sovereigns that these documents have to do with. So this one is a limited document. Everyone knows that. The federal government does not have powers to legislate in every area. There's a very limited set of areas. This document, the Idaho Constitution, is a limitation on Idaho state power, which means that when the legislature makes laws, they can make any law that's legislatable under the police power, which is health, safety, nuisance, and morality. That's traditional state scope of power. Unless this document says, no, you can't. Right? So this is a limitation. In fact, the legislature of Idaho is the only branch, according to this document, that has to take an oath to support this document. It's not till you get to the statutes that the executive and the judicial branch actually have to take an oath to this document. In this document itself, it's only the legislature. So one of the key differences is I understand this relationship between these two constitutions and how to actually make the arguments and lead the office with thought leadership as to how to help Idaho push back against Biden and the federal power and reinvigorate state sovereignty according to the proper methods given in our anchor documents. So that's number one. Number two, I didn't go into law till I was 45, which means I know how to talk to non-lawyers about the law. And this is really in my YouTube videos. I think there are 93 of them today. Every weekday since January 1st, a 1 to 4 minute video on various questions that I was asked on the campaign trail. And when I get enough questions, I think, oh, okay, this is a statewide issue, so I should do a video on it. And some of the videos, like the vaccine mandates, that took 2 weeks, so it was 8 videos. Every Friday being race day, where I talk about the race. So Monday through Thursday for 2 weeks, I talked about the vaccine mandates, talked about illegal aliens. This week we're talking about the future of the office and what my plans are for the office. But I do that all in plain English, and that's where the legal opinions of the Attorney General need to be readable and understandable by ordinary citizens of Idaho that are not lawyers, so they can read them and say, I get it, I understand what the law is. And the reason that's important is because it's the values of the people of Idaho that turned into this Constitution, from which all the statutes in Idaho Code are created. And so it's really, really important for citizens in Idaho to understand the law, and I think I can do that better than either of the other two candidates. So that's number two. Number three is I have the significant office experience outside of government, which is really important. These guys both jumped into government. One's living off a government pension. He's a lobbyist. He left the full-time practice of law in 2006. A lot of people leave the law. I get it. But it doesn't mean they're a lawyer ready to understand and move the state forward as Attorney General. And so, they say, well, gosh, Art, you've never been in government. And I take that as a badge of pride. I do. I really want to bring some private sector metrics, some measuring tools, some service provisioning, some really good management into the state of Idaho, because it looks like it's missing. So there's some work to do there. And my sense is that the Attorney General's office is probably too big And part of that sense, Greg, is just because when you have a monopoly system, it tends to grow and grow and grow. There's little to hold it back. The hallmark of a good conservative is to recognize that these documents are designed in relation to each other in order to protect our freedoms and liberties. And so the best argument for small government is not that I don't get taxed so much. The best argument for small government is that it stays the heck out of my way when I'm a free person out there operating my business, right? Raising my children, schooling my children. Those are really the best arguments for small government, because in reality, the private solution is usually, I would say 90+% of the time, superior to the government solution. So we always have to ask ourselves, when there's a problem in society, what is the private solution? Because that's the direction where we need to always go as free Americans. Now, they don't do that on the rest of the globe, but we do that as free Americans. And so, recognizing these things with a crystal clear view is what I bring that neither of my other two opponents have. And I think that's three things.
Okay. I think so. All right, so one more question, and then we'll, at the very end, you can talk to the camera, give your pitch to the citizens of Idaho here in the closing days of the campaign. You and Raul Labrador are both challenging Wasden, and I think the biggest thing I see online and reading the comments and talking to people is, for those who want Wasden out, they're concerned that you and Labrador are going to split the vote and give it to Wasden. And so, some will say, hey, look, some of the polling says the Labrador's ahead. You should just get out and let Labrador try to take on Wasden. What would be your response to those people?
The response is that the reason I can't get out is because he's not qualified to be in the race as an attorney. And what Idaho needs is a really good attorney. So if I got out of the race, I would be in effect saying, Raul Labrador can be a worthy competitor to Lawrence Wasden as an attorney. Okay, that's just laughable to me. I could not do that. So I got in the race early, February 2021, and I started traveling around the state. I've had over 100 appearances in various places, Lincoln Days, meet and greets. I mean, it just kind of goes on and on. All of us are tired, ready to sleep for a week right now. But Lawrence Wasden, in my view, traveling around the state, cannot win this race without significant Democrat crossover. Now, the Democrats, as we know, don't mind that civil liberties get criminalized. The Democrats, as a general rule, don't mind if these two constitutions are completely ignored. And so, people that watched, I've talked to people in some of the most liberal areas of the state, or maybe some people would say the establishment areas of the state. I don't know what you call them, but Twin Falls and Pocatello are traditionally very establishment oriented. And even in those places, when I talk to people and I ask them, what do you think about the current incumbent? What do you think? The response is usually, and I would say 90+% of the time, again, it's pretty significant. They say, Lawrence has done a good job. He's been in there 20 years, and we need some fresh blood in there. And so even if they're not recognizing or, against him in a political way, they still recognize that government is best served when there's fresh blood coming in. And he's not seen that way anymore. And we get the same thing about other candidates that I won't mention, but it kind of works like when they first went to Boise, they were good. We liked what they did. But then over time, they got sucked into the swamp or something to that nature. And now they've served their time. So my view presently of the race is that Wasden is done. And that the race is really between Labrador and myself. So then I look at Raul Labrador and I say to myself, okay, well, He had an undistinguished law career. I mean, he didn't make his mark in the profession. You know, I mentioned before, I grew my law practice from a solo to 6 attorneys in 3 states in 15 years. Okay, you don't do that anywhere unless you're providing really excellent service, good legal advice, and you're trustworthy. That means you not only serve the clients you have, but they send you other clients. They go talk to Art. And I took great pride in North Idaho at being on everybody's 3 list. Who are the 3 attorneys you would recommend? For my areas of practice, I was always on that 3 list. That made me very proud. That means I was doing the job right. I taught at Gonzaga Law School. It was brief. It was only for a semester, and then law school applications dropped through the floor, and I was low on the totem pole, so they got rid of me. But that was for contracts drafting, and then I taught contracts for paralegals at North Idaho College for 4 years. I wrote numerous legal articles, including the very first article in Idaho that took private property rights and the drones that were just coming out in like 06, 7, 8, 9, 10, that how do drones affect private property rights? Like, how close can a drone fly over my property before it's a trespass, right? I wrote that first article for the State Bar magazine. So I've been on the cutting edge of law, and I'm proud of that. And I've distinguished myself in the legal field. Mr. Labrador has not done that. He left the law in 06. He went to the state legislature, didn't get any bills passed there, went to Congress for 4 terms, excuse me, didn't get anything passed there, left. Now he can live on a federal pension. I understand he has a cabinet refinishing business to also make some income. And then he's a registered lobbyist, and he probably still does some part-time attorney work. But I can tell you it's a case of, you know, jack of all trades, master of none. In my view, he is not qualified for the job. I've told him this on several occasions, both publicly and privately. I asked him to get out before March 25, the withdrawal date, and he wouldn't do it because in his view, this is a political job, and he's a policy guy, and he was on Fox News, so he should get the job. You remember he tried to do this to Russ Fulcher in 2018, and it worked. He jumped into the governor's race after telling Russ Fulcher he would not. Russ Fulcher sidestepped and went to Congress, where he is now. Raul went to the governor's race and lost. So Raul is a guy looking for a job. I'm not looking for a job. I don't need this job. But Idaho needs me to do this job. And so I am very forthright about it. I think I can still beat Raul on Tuesday. To the extent voters are paying attention, I think I would win in a landslide. I think if Raul stepped out of the race now and said, you know what, I thought that I was ready to be the Attorney General, but Art's really the guy we need, I think I'd beat Wasden. Yes, I do get a lot of chatter, and I notice the Republican Party is kind of coalescing around certain candidates. And then there's significant pushback if you're not one of those preferred candidates. And so, but when I hear that pushback, I kind of don't care, because in the end, Greg, I'm not a party guy, okay? I am a Republican, but I don't put party first. I put these documents first. Furthermore, I'm not a politician. I'm just not. I don't go along to get along. You can't pay me off. You know, I can't raise $200,000 in 2 weeks like Raul Labrador did. And you wonder what those people are buying, because they're not getting an attorney, really. No. I'm an attorney. And what Idaho needs in the AG's office is an attorney, and a good one. And I'm a good one, and I've proven that in my field, and I have a plan to move forward, and I'm ready to go. So in my view, both of my opponents, if they were really looking at what's good for Idaho, they would do this. They would both drop out. They would say, Art should be the Attorney General, vote for Art, let's get behind Art. And then Lawrence Wasden would say, I will help you with understanding how the office works in a transition team that actually works for Idaho, for Idaho. That's what we need. We don't need somebody going, well, he was good in the party and he served his time and he's got government experience. Okay, baloney. This is the election when Idahoans have to put the insiders out. I'm the outsider. I get it. I'm going through to May 17. I think I have a really good chance, and I'm asking for the vote of the people to actually help me right Idaho, and let's move forward. Let's have a good state again. Let's be independent.
All right, well, that kind
Yeah.
of sounded like your campaign pitch there, so.
That's what I'm about.
Yeah, if you've got anything else, you're welcome to plug your website and do a quick message to the people of Idaho.
Well, the website is, Macomber4Idaho.com. It's FOR Idaho.com. It's Macomber, MACOMBER. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube has all the videos, Gab, there's a couple videos on Rumble, although Rumble makes it kind of hard to do videos, and Gab, I'm on Gab. So
There's a lot of social media now.
I'm on all this social media, and people should feel, but if you really want to get to know me as an attorney, watch the videos on YouTube. Because there, I actually take a legal issue, and then I looked up the law and I analyzed it. Here's how you do it. And there is a political analytical structure to the law. If you do it right, it's like a mechanic with a car, right? You bring your car in, it's knocking, something's going on, you don't know. The mechanic is the guy that has the analytical skills to know how to figure out what's wrong and to fix it, okay? I'm the mechanic. I'm the attorney guy. I know how to analyze it and how to fix it. So I hope Idahoans will look at that and take care. This is a very important election, very important election. When your civil liberties are criminalized and there are constitutional violations by constitutional officers of the state, that's an important election. Every election since Nixon, this is the most important election of your life, right? This is one of them. This is one of them. So I'm looking for the votes, and I appreciate your time on the interview, and let's go. Let's go.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, sir. We appreciate it, and good luck to you.
Thank you.